Hi, I'm Bob. Welcome to Piano by Ear. This is not a general purpose piano course. The goal here is just to learn to play some chords to accompany yourself singing or to accompany somebody else singing. Here's what it's like. You probably are familiar with somebody strumming chords on a guitar while they sing or a friend of theirs sings. Well, we're going to do the same kind of deal on a piano. Okay, here we go. So you see with our keyboard graphic here that the keyboard is laid out with black keys, two black keys and three black keys, and it repeats 2 and 3 and 2 and 3, and that's how we see where we're at on the keyboard. That pattern repeats itself every 5 black notes, and that's also every 7 white notes. So you add that 5 and 7, we've got 12 notes, and then the pattern repeats. So now when I say about lower notes or higher notes on the keyboard, as you move to the left, those are the lower notes. As you move to the right, those are the higher notes. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, here's the notes to play for a C chord. I've labeled them for your fingers of your right hand. So every other finger is going to play every other note. And you got those 3 notes that when you play them together, that's called a chord. And this one here is called a C chord. And the way you shape your hand to play that C chord is going to be the same way you shape your hand for other chords too. So you're getting some pretty much bang for your buck here, because you're going to learn one shape for your hand that's going to give you the skill then to play several different chords. Okay, the next thing is the notes on the keyboard. We name them, the white keys that is, we name them using the first 7 letters of the alphabet. And we refer to the 3 notes of our chord starting with the lowest of the 3, that's furthest to the left, lowest. So we see our C chord is a C and an E and a G. The lowest note is a C, and that's what we call the chord. So for now, we're going to have a beginner's rule where the name of the chord will be whatever the lowest note is in our chord, the note that's furthest to the left. But that's just a rule for beginners now, because that'll change later. But for now, that'll do. That'll be our rule. The next note higher than a G is an A again, because our 12-note pattern starts over. And remember that 12 notes, that's white notes and black notes added together come to 12 in our pattern. On our keyboard graphic, we'll go ahead and label those top 2 notes. That's a A and a B. When you have 2 notes that are 12 notes apart and have the same name, we call the distance between those 2 notes an octave. The A near the top of the keyboard graphic, we say that that's an octave higher or an octave above the A that's further down in the middle of our keyboard graphic. Similarly, that B note around the middle of our keyboard graphic, we say is an octave below the B that's the highest note of our keyboard graphic. If we had one more note at the top of our keyboard here, we'd have a 2-octave keyboard, because the distance between the lowest note and the highest note would be 2 octaves. So let's fill in the names of the lowest 5 white keys. At the bottom of our keyboard, we have a C and an E and a G. So we can play our C chord down there instead if we want to. it sounds lower down there, naturally. Now on your keyboard, whatever you're playing on, practicing on, you can look around wherever you see a C and an E and a G. Depending on how many octaves on your keyboard, you can try playing your C chord in all those different locations on your keyboard and see which one sounds the best to you, which ones sound too low, which ones sound too high, which ones sound like what you'd like to hear if you were singing a song over the top of that. And the way we express that, we say we're playing the chord in different octaves. And this is using the word octave a little differently. Before I said that an octave was the distance between two notes that were 12, 13 notes apart. The way I used this here was to refer to a portion of the keyboard that is a 13-note section of the keyboard. Then we call that high octave of the keyboard, or that low octave of the keyboard. This is stuff you don't need to memorize. This stuff will come up over and over again, and it'll just soak in. Alrighty, the next thing we're going to talk about is the notes of a chord we refer to with numbers. And the C in our C chord here, we'll call that a 1. And then the numbering goes up so that the notes of the chord are the 1 and the 3 and the 5. Now the 1 also gets called the root quite often, so that means the same thing. And the 3 gets called the third. The 5 gets called the fifth. So whether a musician says 1, 3, 5 of the chord, or whether they say the root, the third, and the fifth, they're talking about the same thing. Alrighty, the next thing here, we're going to move our C chord up from that lower octave back up to the higher octave again. And when you want to make your chord sound a little fuller, what you can do is add a bass note, because you've got your left hand left there, and all you got to do is play one note with your left hand, and almost always the bass note is going to be the same as the 1, the root of your chord. So in our case with a C chord, we're going to play a C. And on our keyboard graphic, we've only got one C that's lower than our chord. So that's going to be the one we have to pick to be our bass note. Now once we play that, we've got twice as many C notes going as the other notes. We got 2 C's, but now only 1 E and 1 G. So we don't want to play that bass note too loud, because we still want to hear our E and our G. Now that you have 2 hands on the keyboard, you can experiment with rhythms. One way to do it without having to think too much is to just play the bass note every time you play the chord. But you can also mix it up. So say alternate, play a bass note and then the chord, and then a bass note and the chord. Or you could play a bass note and the chord 3 times. If it's a waltz, you could play a bass note and the chord 2 times. Or maybe reggae. And now we're just about down to the end of the lesson. One thing I wanted to mention is don't forget about dynamics. That's playing softer sometimes and louder other times. A general rule of thumb here is if your singer is singing a low part of the song, they're usually not going to be as loud, and so you might want to play softer there. But then when they get to the part of the song where they have to sing higher notes and they really got to belt it out and then they're louder, then that's when you play louder. And a lot of songs, maybe they'll start off softer and then they get louder, and then it comes back down again and gets softer, and then it builds up and gets louder again, and that's what makes it sound more like real music. So now next lesson we'll learn a couple more chords, and then you'll be able to accompany somebody singing or yourself singing on some 3-chord songs. So that's it for this lesson. Thank you.